Good morning, everyone, and welcome to you who are joining this webinar today. The purpose of this webinar is to discuss the EY report on board priorities and to explore how boards can effectively address those priorities. The EY report highlights 5 board priorities, each supported by practical actions. The report will be presented by Martijn de Jong, who you can see on the screen, and the presentation will then be followed by a panel discussion. The panel discussion will be led by Andrew Hobbs from EY Center for Board Matters, and the panel will include Maria Pierdicchi, Chair of ecoDa, and Rytis Ambrazevicius, Chair of the Baltic Institute of Corporate Governance. Maria and Rytis are both independent board members. We will discuss within the panel specifically about geopolitics and AI, two topics that are highly relevant to board agendas today. But we want to make this webinar as interactive as possible, and we will gather your views and opinions through polls during the discussion. And as usual, you are very welcome to submit your questions via the Q&A function. The webinar is being recorded as usual, and you will be available, and that will be available on our YouTube channel. The slides and the summary note will also be circulated afterwards. I would like now to hand over to Martijn, who will present the EY report. Martijn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beatrice, for that nice introduction and the overview of what the webinar is about today. My name is Martijn de Jong, and amongst other things, I'm part of the EMEIA Center for Board Matters at EY, where we focus on corporate governance, excellence, and board effectiveness. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to present our most recent report on board priorities. We recognize that over the last couple of years, the board priorities themselves have not significantly changed, but what has changed is the speed and the environment in which the organizations need to deal with them. The forces of the transformation are now increasingly non-linear, accelerated, volatile, and interconnected. In that environment, priorities do not stand alone as topics, treating them like that, but they need to be interconnected. And from that perspective, boards need to look outward for everything that's coming at them, but also inward in relation to how they deal with those topics and the governance model in relation to that. So in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll walk you through the priorities that we identified and how you can deal with them as a board member. So in that sense, we shifted the focus of the report from what the board priorities are to how you can deal with them. This is the list of the board priorities, the 6 board priorities. It's 5 of them, and the 6th one is really how you can deal with them. So from that perspective, let's get the discussion and the presentation started. And as Beatrice already mentioned, the panel discussion following my presentation will focus on the first 2 priorities being geopolitics and AI/innovation. The first one, geostrategy. I think that is the most visible priority of the ones that I'll walk you through today. Geopolitics is reshaping markets, the supply chain, investment decisions, and talent flows all at the same time and interconnected. Research shows that in 2021, only 26% of the boards were taking prompt action in relation to geopolitics. By the end of last year, that had risen to 76, and I'm sure that is still higher at this point in time, given the developments that we are recently experiencing. It's important that geopolitics, or the geostrategy, as that's the way how boards and companies can deal with geopolitics, is not simply a risk issue, but also a competitive capability. If you sit back and wait until things to happen, you're most likely too late and are not longer focusing on long-term value creation. So it's important to make sure that you use the opportunities that are currently present based on everything that's happening to and around us. And in that sense, boards need to anticipate the disruption that's happening. It's no longer a standalone issue that happened and it will go away. Use scenario planning. We're seeing that more and more and getting more and more advanced, also in relation to tooling for how to deal with everything that's coming at us at this point in time. The political and regulatory insights need to feed into major decisions. They can no longer be treated separately as such. And from that perspective, it's also important that the company, management, and the board take geopolitical ownership across the organization together. One of the people that we interviewed for this report said that it's really important to develop a house view on how to deal with the geopolitical situation and translate that into a geostrategy from a company perspective. So as I mentioned, have a look at the opportunities that exist based on that, on everything that's happening and will keep happening. And only defense is not going to bring you the long-term value creation that the company itself and its stakeholders are looking for. Then this slide, and I'll flip back to this one. So for each of the priorities in the report, we've included actions to consider. There's a sample here on the slide, and that goes for the same priorities that I will cover during the rest of the presentation as well. And we've also included questions that board members can ask to management and a broader group of C-suite executives within the company. So I have not included all of the questions for each priorities, but it's a teaser for the report so that when you pick that up, when we share that after the webinar, you can use that to your own advantage by focusing and having a read of the questions that you can ask on the individual topics that we've included. Then the second priority, of course, we cannot leave AI out of our board priorities report, but it's not only AI, it's broader. It's also about innovation and how you can use AI to innovate the company and from an external, but also from an internal perspective. Many leaders in relation to this report have told us that organizations are in danger of confusing AI adoption with real innovation. A clear example and a quote that's included in the report as well is digital popcorn. We see a number of organizations where AI initiatives pop up individually within processes, within business units, etc. So the AI innovation is popping up everywhere without a clear strategy. That's one of the key messages in relation to this priority, to create durable value. You can do that by looking at AI and innovation through three lenses: strategy, talent, and accountability. The first one being strategy, is that it's really important to develop and think about it holistically, about AI and innovation in a broader perspective, not just focus on individual processes that can be improved or be made more efficient. It's really about the transformation that the business can go through and the opportunities that exist in relation to creating long-term value. The second one is talent. It's not about reducing entry-level work. It is to reduce entry-level work, not the entry-level talent. So make sure that you look after the human as part of this process as well. It should not be about reducing numbers of people that work for you, because that might also have an impact on the pipeline and the next generations of leadership. So the human in the loop is always important and needs to be considered where you make decisions in relation to increasing the efficiency. So looking at the longer term here as well. Then the last one is about accountability, really the governance over innovation and AI. I'll go back to the comment I just made about the popcorn. Make sure that it's not popping up everywhere as individual initiatives, but that there's a broader view on how this should impact the company, how you set up clear governance over AI and innovation, that you robustly test whatever you are going to roll out, and that you also take into account risk management and include explicit accountability. In that sense, and probably related to the digital popcorn, is also what we're seeing is FOMO, the fear of missing out, that some companies invest in AI without having a clear vision or strategy in relation to that. But they feel that they have to invest in AI because everyone else is doing so. And that's where the role of the board comes in. Make sure that there's a strategy and keep the organization to it, including management and the individual layers and processes within the organization. So the main message is go for business transformation in a smart way instead of just focusing on efficiency. The third priority focuses on cybersecurity. Of course, that's linked to AI and innovation. It's quite a more technical topic, but that's also where our main observation here lies. Cybersecurity used to be an isolated IT process or a focused topic that was treated in a silo. As businesses become more digital, it now also reaches into operations, suppliers, transactions, resilience, and reputation. So it becomes a more integrated topic and issue to deal with in the boardroom, as the topics that I just mentioned are and should be a priority for the boardroom. The second topic that I want to mention here is speed. Also here, the technological developments are going faster than ever. So make sure that this topic is not only on the agenda once to talk about compliance, but as I just mentioned, in relation to a broader business perspective, make sure that it's included in the board cycles on a regular basis. The boards need to make sure that the information flow in relation to cybersecurity is there and that it's well established before a crisis. As often mentioned, it's not really about if a company is going to have a cyber risk issue or event, but when. And that's I'll conclude with the final message that it's no longer about compliance, but it should be about curiosity. So also here, look at the opportunities that when you manage your business well in relation to cybersecurity, also opportunities exist to make sure that you're, from a competition point of view, ahead of your competitors. Then I'll move into the fourth priority about sustainability. As we all know, there's some pressure on sustainability, mainly coming from the US. But what we're seeing as part of producing our board priorities report is that it's still a topic that really is alive and well within the boardroom, just slightly in a different way. It's now connected to resilience and risk. So it's not a topic by itself, but also, and it is quite similar to the topics that are previously discussed, also here it's about integration into the broader business perspective. Of course, from an EU, the focus on sustainability reporting led to quite a compliance focus, but we're now starting to see a move back and a more holistic approach to sustainability when you're talking about risk and resilience in your geopolitical organization and the geostrategy stemming from that. It's important to consider sustainability in all the decisions that you're making. So when you're talking about supply chain, make sure to consider sustainability as well. So it's no longer a standalone topic, but it's integrated within the business. And for example, when you make investments, make sure that you always consider the sustainability perspective, given the long-term focus of the company itself and its stakeholders. Then I'll move to the last priority before we get to the topic, how to deal with all these board priorities that are coming at the board and the company in a greater speed and in a very dynamic environment. This one's about leadership, culture, and talent for the future, which we consider to be the foundation for the previous priorities. You can only deal with those priorities when you have the right people, the right culture, and the right message where every part of the business, especially when you're talking about that from a people perspective, are really talking the same language and looking in the same direction. So it's making sure that expectations are clear, that accountability is real, and that psychological safety is strong enough to allow to challenge, learn, and adapt. And as we've seen in the previous priority, that's where a lot of topics are now in focus, whether it's AI, cyber, sustainability, or geopolitics. In all these elements, the people are the foundation. So even when you're talking about AI, It's really important to keep the human in the loop, and that's where the People Foundation comes from. Then the last topic that I will cover before we move into the panel discussion is how, as a board member, you can deal with the topics that are coming at you. We refer in our board priorities report to a Board of the Future report that was released recently, and where we focus on the 6E agenda. It includes 6 E's that help you as a board member to think about the governance model and the things that you will need to change to deal with all these topics and the speed that they're coming at you. So, for example, elevate efficiency, exercise foresight, and employ AI, so also in the boardroom. It's important that boards really think about how they can do things differently and more smartly. Think about the time, the focus, the information, and the confidence, and how you deal with that as a board member. I do recognize that this is only 1 or 2 minutes on changing the governance model. So I really refer you to this report that also links to the Board of the Future report, where this stems from, and that also include actions to consider and questions to ask when you think about how to best deal with the responsibilities that you have in this volatile world as a board member. That's where I'll stop. I'm happy to hand over to Andrew, who will lead the panel discussing the topics of geopolitics and AI with our distinguished panel members, Maria and Rytis. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Martijn, for that canter through some meaty topics there. You just introduced the two that we're going to focus on, because we're conscious that in half an hour we could never do justice to all 6 or so that were in there. So we thought we would spend some time on a couple of them. And the thing about these topics are that they are interrelated, not just the two we're going to discuss, but all of the 6. And for that reason, I'm going to be handing back to Beatrice in about half an hour to talk about some really interesting work that ecoDa's kicked off on systems thinking. So in other words, how you think across all these issues rather than treating them in silos. But before that, I'm delighted to be with Maria and Rytis on this panel and be with you this morning. We will kick off in a set on geopolitics, but I think are we doing a polling question, team? Are we going to do a poll first, or should we just move straight to the discussion?
No, Maria will launch the poll now.
Great. We've got just a question for you as audience to make sure that you're awake on how geopolitics is showing up in your organizations. So I'll just read it out there. We're looking for you to answer a question about how your company is impacted by geopolitical uncertainty. And the answers, the multiple choice, can be everything from no impact all the way through to severe impact. So we look forward to the results. We will share them afterwards as well. I'll give you a couple of minutes or a minute or so to. Can we see the results now? Please. Maybe while we take the technology, we'll take the answers now and then. There we go. Very good. Thanks very much.
No, they're too significant.
So there we've had quite a few responses as well. So this is a pretty good sample, and it looks like that there has been not a 44% there seeing a moderate impact, but quite a considerable number of you are seeing significant and severe impacts. Which I don't know if I'm surprised by that or not. I think that probably reflects what I was thinking was happening. Just before getting into questions, Maria, Rytis, any reflections on the responses there? Is that as you would expect, or has that surprised you in any way?
I think it's reflecting that almost every industry is impacted, of course, to different extents. So if you are a local, maybe producer, you have less impact, but it's clear that this is becoming a very important topic for all.
And I from my side, I would say that it depends how your business was related to the eastern part of Europe, means the Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and so on. So I think that it is more kind of obvious that in the western part of Europe, these connections were not so very, very strong and not very wide. While in the eastern part of Europe, they were more close to the I mean, tied to, I mean, from the business perspective. And I can talk about the Baltics. So we were really doing great, business between east and west and earning a lot and growing our economies because of that, but not since 2014 when Crimea Peninsula was occupied by, annexed actually by Russia. So, but we will talk about later.
That's a great point. I mean, if we'd had more time, we could have asked where the local businesses are located in their operations and seen where the correlation was between the amount of impact, as you say. Right, let's kick off on the discussion. I'm going to start with Maria first. I mean, just on the topic of geopolitics. I mean, as you just said, it's highly relevant to all sectors. How are the boards that you're working with taking the discussion beyond almost talking about what's in the news and perhaps wondering what to do about it, and actually really considering and modeling and understanding what's happening and the impact on the business and what you might do about it from a strategic perspective?
Yes, thank you, thank you very much. And I would like also to thank Ernst & Young for this very interesting report, which is really giving us a very good picture of how things become more complex, more uncertain, and more interconnected, which is indeed the fil rouge of the report, and I share completely this view. So first of all, geopolitics is not silo anymore. It must be really part of the strategic discussions. So from the risk committee and the audit committee to the board discussion, which means operating from the beginning of a plan and every year, a scenario analysis, which is not always easy to do, and try to figure out how different developments can affect the company and what kind of mitigation measures and protection and emergency measures the company can activate. This is becoming it's in any case very difficult because a lot of these developments are hard to predict. They come from different areas. They are extremely difficult also to predict in the impact they may have either in the supply chain, in your business in general, as well as in your different the risk that you are facing. For instance, if we think the last year, three major impacts, right? I mean, Ukraine war is been going on for several years, affecting all the companies that operate with Russia or they have presence in Russia, sanctions, and so on. So, I mean, it's been going on for a long time. Then we have the US tariff policy, which has affected a lot of industries because you have to decide whether to invest, divest, relocate your productions, etc., etc. And then Middle East, Hormuz, and the war in Iran has really changed a lot. The energy market, putting a lot of new doubts on in energy independence and so on. So just three events that are impacting a lot of industries in different ways. So how is the board reacting? First of all, I think there is more discussions on this topic. There is more involvement also of external experts when the competencies are not necessarily the best around the board. The problem of competencies, I think it remains very important. It remains important. It's not only competence in geopolitical developments, but it's really having gone through, especially executives, through crisis and the ability to respond quickly and to develop the right strategy in reaction. So I think this is calling more and more for executive experience, executive also coming from different industries that have been gone through different crises or transformations. It has also increased the number of meetings and the complexity of the topics, because for instance, for Russia, once you decide whether to stay or leave, then you have a number of very difficult issues, and especially in the financial industry that is also under the scrutiny of the regulator, but not only, on how you divest, what kind of implications you have, how do you make sure that you protect your people while you are also reducing your exposure, and so on. So which triggers a lot of extraordinary meetings, a lot of extra discussion at the risk and audit committee level, but also at board level. I would also say that board training remains very important, because you cannot have all the expertise around the table, and you need also to be updated on potential impact of new developments. For instance, I'm thinking about, development in Taiwan. Are we all prepared to face, changes that could, and also the correlation between a certain event and all the, different impact that you may have on the supply chain, on your business, etc., etc. So I think simulation is very important. Having the board prepared to face emergency plans and to challenge management, and also dialogue with management is becoming more important, because management has much more ability to understand the potential impact and to propose mitigation actions, insurance, and so on. So it really takes a lot of time and engagement with management, and making sure that we have the right dialogue, that we have the right transparency, because all of a sudden things may come up and the board could be unprepared. And then from the risk committee, also the potential challenges are also discussed at board level. And of course, this requires a lot of time. Prioritization. So prioritization is becoming an issue in boards. I think we have way too many topics, and it's very hard to really understand priorities. So this is the role of board members also, to set priorities, say maybe we can spend less time on really compliance-driven issues and spend more time on the real strategic issues that can affect our decisions in the short and in the medium term. So overall, I would say the board, as a result of this also interconnection, is switching more role from oversight to more stewardship, and in a way from compliance to more judgment also, because a lot of this decision will be made on how to face geopolitical risk or how to react will be made based on very relative information. You never have enough information. You have to take risks, and taking risk means using more judgment, and have a very solid dialogue with management on how to position you in taking those risks, mitigating them, and move forward. Also with agility, with ability to change your decisions. For instance, dealing with Russia may require today to stay, and then maybe monitor developments over time, so that as sanctions change, you may adapt your presence and reduce your presence according to the evolution of regulation and so on. So there could be agility, and flexibility is also a very important way to face with this challenge.
Thanks, Maria. And just before I move to Rytis, I just want to follow up on a couple of things that you said. In our report, we talk about sort of the benefits of scenario planning and simulations, and you mentioned that too. If you're a smaller company with not a lot of resources, any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, use the important think tanks and reports, World Economic Forum and so on, could be a starting point, of course. And then maybe try to identify where you have more vulnerabilities, if you have an area where you export or produce or you want to invest, and ask maybe some external expert a deep dive on those potential risks and opportunities. Let's not forget opportunities, because from geopolitical risks, if you are well managed, you can also identify opportunities to develop new business or to become more efficient in your production, to locate new investments and so on. So I would say rely on external experts, and then be very leverage on your independent directors. They are there to help you. And when I think family companies are actually maybe they benefit more in a way of the advice of independent board members, and also the ability of board members to give them advice on how to better use external experts, or how to open some doors to have a dialogue with some people or some companies that may provide some valuable input.
That's super interesting. I mean, this is a topic for another webinar, but I've been working on building an agent to actually help me do some scenario analysis for political risk, but using AI, which is deriving some quite interesting results. he certainly speeds it up.
Absolutely. I didn't mention that, but I'm sure Rytis will.
Good, very good. Thank you for that. Rytis, I'm going to turn to you. I mean, and as you sort of said in your opening remarks, you've been dealing in the Baltics with geopolitical risk for much longer than perhaps many other companies. What have you learned during that time?
So first, as I said, that for many years since we gained back our independence in 1991, we were kind of benefiting of cooperating with Russia because we were kind of like a bridge, between Russia or Eastern countries and Western countries, and we were kind of really making a good business with that. But I think this moment came when in 2014, when this southern part or peninsula, Crimea Peninsula, was just annexed by Russia in one day, and nobody reacted. Everyone was calm. I mean, everyone in the world. I mean, and then we realized that it could be not the first and maybe not the last attempt made by Russia. Of course, the sanctions were already enforced to Russia. I mean, first kind of stage and so on. And then we realized that this era of good cooperation with Russia is coming to end, and we have to change the mindset and our actually approach of our businesses in the Baltics in a way that we will concentrate more on working with the western part of Europe rather than eastern part. And that was actually the beginning of changes of the mindset on the board level as well. Because before, the boards were not asking so many questions related to geopolitics, to the risks related to the cooperation with Russia or making business or supplies, because Russia is very famous with cheap raw materials and so on, and it was really beneficial for our businesses. And then the company started to address kind of geopolitical risks. Now we are calling them geopolitical risks because now we have even more different conflicts and so on all over the world. And for example, I can talk about specifically about the company that I'm serving on the board. It's a water utility company, means we are supplying pure water and then we are treating the wastewater. And we were already very much in risk governance, and our risk management system was really is very robust. And we had a quite long list of the total list of the risks. But when such events were happening, let's say in 2022, in beginning of 2022 in Ukraine, when invasion happened from Russia, so we really reassessed and the existing risks, and of course this identification of new potential risk was also a big exercise for all of us. And we found that the total number of the risk, of course, increased. However, the potential other risks that were already present on our list or register, we reassessed, and it appeared that the importance or potential impact of those risks increased. So what was kind of the outcome for us as a company? Because when we are deciding on how we will be mitigating every single risk, among many other measures is the financial kind of aspect of this mitigation of each risk. And then we summed up all these euros. So in addition to, as I said, that the number of the risks increase, the total number, this list became longer, but the investments or expenses that we had to have in a certain period of years to mitigate this risk almost tripled. So it is really big change. And personally, me, I was not expecting that, we will have this result. I was thinking, of course, that it will grow the demand for investments or expenses, but not 3 times. But we did the job, and we are happy that we did it in time. And of course, we are following now all the plans of risk mitigation and investing this money, step by step at this plan internally.
That's fascinating. And I mean, you were talking there a lot about sort of risk mitigation and the cost of risk. What about opportunities? Where have you seen advantages come out of your sort of very methodical approach to this topic?
Actually, advantages, there are in finding new markets, new suppliers, new partners, and so on. So here are the major advantages, I would say. Because the bigger number of suppliers you will have, the more secure you will be in supply chain. That is obvious, and it was done. Of course, it demanded from the management a lot of work, hard work, but everyone understood that only in that way we can stay efficient. We can stay competitive and so on and create value, not decrease that value, because it's very easy to say that, oh, we cannot do anything, the supply chains collapsed and so on and so, but nevertheless, you are kind of working hard to find new opportunities, and we did that quite successfully, I would say. One of the examples, we were making a big investment into renovation of water treatment station. It's about 40 million euros, 40. And I believe that it's mostly related to the reinforced concrete, and here we need a lot of metal, this kind of. And the major supplier until 2022 was Ukraine, not anymore Russia. And then the project was already running, and Ukraine as a supplier disappeared. So we had to sit together with our actually construction company that we had a contract with and find new opportunities, and we were quite successful, and we finished in budget and in time this very, very important project. But it demanded a lot of kind of mindset changes and creativity even from the management, and the board was really very, very kind of strictly monitoring all these processes, even though that before we also, when we are running such a projects, we are always asking, what risks do you see that can hinder this project, and how are you going to mitigate these risks? It's not like just dreaming that, oh, we will do this and sun will shine all the time. No. Think about and analyze and so on. Sorry.
Thanks, Rytis. We've had a really interesting question in from Soriana Popescu, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, which is a very nice segue between this topic and the next one of AI. And she asks, either of you, it'd be great if you could take it, but what do you think about AI and EU strategy of potentially independent AI infrastructure? And if I understand the question correctly, I think she's suggesting that the pursuit of rare earths and critical minerals, which help in building chips and data centers, is creating geopolitical issues in itself. But I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that question at all, either of you. And I suppose that the point is removed is how you're thinking about that in the companies that you work with.
I think very briefly, I think this is an issue. This is an issue when you decide which providers you are working with, especially for long-term contracts. Sometimes you have, for instance, for financial industry, moving to cloud requires a very important decision. And the fact that the data centers are in the US and there is a monopoly in a way is an issue that is considered at risk committee level, but also at board level. So we try to balance. I mean, I've seen many companies having discussions on this quite important discussion, and finding also this, which is also triggering good contractual agreements, ability to exit and change and so on. On the other side, we should also work to have more European providers, which is another different topic, but it's also very clear in the board discussions.
Yeah, I agree with Maria, and I also agree that it's very important to have a very kind of robust contracts with the suppliers. But when the day X will come,
yes,
Nobody know what will happen with these suppliers or service service level and so on and so on. So I really would be voting to establish something that in Europe, I mean that will help European companies to keep its data within the Europe. I mean, it's more technical thing, I would say, a little bit, and it's not rocket science, of course. And of course, it demands a little bit of money, but that investment will pay out quite fast, because demand, when I'm talking to all kinds of businesses, all of them are raising this risk that it's too risky to keep all the data somewhere we don't know where. But if it would be some European solution, local solution, let's call it, so we'd be eager. So it means that the demand probably is there. Just, we have to organize the supply, and that's all.
And that takes time.
Yeah, I think it would go back also to the issue of diversification. All risks are faced with one of the major mitigation is diversification. And here we have very low diversification. So we have to struggle to get more diversification. Also, maybe putting together effort at industry level to build or support some European infrastructure, because we can do a lot if we have, a more collective approach at industry level.
Also reminds me a bit about the sort of the conversation we had about cyber many years ago, which was really about understanding what's absolutely critical in your operations, that you need to make sure that you've got the resilience in this sort of for your platforms. And it's a bit like the tech sovereignty package that the EU's brought out, with sort of assessing what the level of risk is in whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, let's move to AI. We've got another polling question, which is all about how mature your technology innovation and AI strategy is at the organizations that you represent. I don't know if we can put this up on the screen. I'll give you a minute or two to... And it goes from very low maturity to very high. I'd love to see what you say here. Okay, let's see if we can display the results on the screen. Okay, we've got, what do we got? So again, it's sort of reverting to the mean, where most people are sort of saying that they're moderately mature. So they've got some initiatives in place, but it's perhaps not as coherent as it could be. And with only 7% of people saying that they've got a comprehensive strategy in place. Again, I don't know, Rytis, do you want to comment on this? Is this as you'd expected to be?
Yeah, I do not see here a very big surprise. I was a little bit thinking that it will be lower, the results, but it's good to see that they are quite okay. But of course, there are plenty of room for further improvement here. One kind of idea comes to my mind when I'm thinking about the employment of AI, that it is just the beginning. Companies currently are not widely, employing this because of the knowledge. And I would start from the knowledge on the top, means the board, then the top management, and down and down and down. And when you do not know what is this tool about, just you are using your own phone and kind of asking some simple questions, but how to employ this in the company and what benefits to gain. And of course, we'll talk, I believe, also about the security matters as well. So it's a lot. And first, what the companies have to do, they have to educate themselves, to train not only few people, but majority of the people. Only then they can make it this switch in the mindset of how AI could be integrated in the business.
Thank you. Maria, any comments?
No, I would agree with Rytis. It must be an holistic approach, not just what you call the digital popcorn kind of AI, popping AI wherever you can. It has to be an integrated view, a strategic view, which is not easy at all to develop, but must involve, of course, top management rethinking the overall business model and understanding where AI can change your business model, can provide a new way of providing services or switching from a service to another, or from a different offering to your customer, as well as the way you manage your supply chain. And this requires a lot of creativity and good talent and good brainstorming. So the role of the board here is really to stimulate this approach. Of course, the board has limited ability to really, it cannot substitute the management, but stimulate the management in adopting AI in a strategic way. And maybe not everything immediately, maybe more progressively, but thinking about the overall business model and how you can take advantage. Not an easy task at all.
Sort of stopping management from adopting a fear of missing out approach and just spending and innovating all over the place without really any focus. I get that. Thank you, Rytis. Just in terms of the sort of points that we made in the report that Martijn talked about earlier, it was really, as Maria just said, focusing on strategy, thinking about your talent model and not being overly short-termist about it as you think about the leaders of the future. And then thirdly, a point on accountability and governance. I mean, if you think about the companies you work with on deploying AI, where's the most important area amongst those three, or indeed another one that you think the board should be spending time on?
Actually, we are doing it a quite simple, I would say, way that what we understand that AI is not like a single kind of alone standing kind of tool or mean. We think that AI is one of many tools that could make company more efficient, more competitive, and successful. And actually, it's a part of innovation. Because there are many tools that could be used for innovations in the company. So what we did already years ago, we developed and approved on the board level the policy on innovations. So and then all these elements that you already mentioned, the goals, the processes, the responsibilities, and their accountabilities are kind of there. And then we are, as a board, we are kind of monitoring how this policy is employed by the management and the company throughout the year. And one of the kind of KPIs we're using, there is a special Eurostat methodology how to measure the innovations. It's investments into the innovation related to revenue of the company. And Eurostat says that it should be about 15%. And I checked recently the report for 2025 in our company, and we managed to reach 19%, even higher level. And more such innovation projects, we call them, are relating to the AI. We are not, what I want to also to emphasize, that we are not kind of pushing whatever it takes, you have to employ AI. Of course, we are thinking kind of smartly in a smart way, but all the time when we see, any opportunity how to employ AI, we are using this in our innovation projects. And I believe that for 2026, this result will be even higher. So this is the way how we are doing this in our company.
Thank you. We've had two questions in from the audience, Susanna and Soriana, which I'm going to sort of put together. One is about the level of literacy at board level in really understanding AI and whether it's a must, but also it relies on the legacy of the company and in terms of its data and systems. And then a question about, do we have suggestions on how the board can push for higher adoption or faster adoption when it's not perhaps a traditional area that the company is familiar, which I suppose is about implementing AI in perhaps companies that don't have high technology investments already. But I don't know if you want to, it seems there it's about board becoming literate and board perhaps driving the transformation a bit faster or more deeply. I don't know if you want to comment.
I think this is an important point because it really relates a lot of the level of understanding an update of the board members on the tools available, on the new approaches to AI. So to some extent, each of us is involved in building its own capabilities, but you need also training, and you need to have an update by the companies you work for in terms of what are their choices, their options, possibly also with some of the providers, because they also provide overviews of where the industry is going. I mean, Microsoft, for instance, is doing very good inductions to board. So this is, again, a question of training, but also of intense dialogue with management, again, which can provide a lot of insight. And I think a key topic is also interconnection between AI and data, good data, and what are we doing in data management, in data pooling, and in extracting data that are reliable and useful, and IT infrastructure, of course, to support the data use as well as all the intense use of AI within a company, and interconnection with cybersecurity, because the more you go digital, the more you use AI, the more you are exposed to risks. So how we monitor those risks, and how we decide whether the costs also in investment in AI are the right ones. Frankly, I think independent advice is always good because, the company can tell you everything, and sometimes it's very hard to challenge, no? Whereas maybe some independent sources can help you. But interconnection, as it was a key topic for geopolitics, remains a key topic also for AI, in my view. And in terms of skills and talent, we need to rely more on young people. So the problem is we are reducing people, because let's be honest, we are reducing people thanks to AI. But how do we train the right people in order to have the capabilities that only young people, also in terms of innovation, can bring to the company? So you run the risk of losing the ability to grow talent over time and have the right pipeline when it comes to managing more complex projects. So in my view, the discussion with HR on talent management, it's a very important strategic discussion. How do we deal with AI while we also make sure that we have the right talent for today and for the future?
Just before I move on back to Beatrice to talk about systems thinking, Rytis, any comments from you on the talent piece, particularly, again, if you think about
what actually we are doing first, of course, training, not only for the board and management, but also for the lower levels in the hierarchy of the company. And then the question, we are addressing to all our managers, different level managers: do you want your unit to work more efficient, to make less mistakes, to have a better kind of life and be more successful? So here is the tool, here is the training, let's go. And they are trying to find all the possible ways. They're coming back: I have this idea about that idea, and so on. We have a head of innovations, and this coordinator really helps them to figure out, what are the best ways to move forward. And of course, if there is a need, a board for a certain kind of approval, we are happy to discuss this and turn on the green light. And then somehow we are kind of changing the culture, that it's not like a fear, or is like whatever, it can do anything. So first, the clear understanding: what is this? What are the opportunities? And then get into your processes and find out what you can do with these tools. And of course, the cooperation inside the company, cooperation with the partners if needed. Outside partners and so on. So it really goes very well. I have some examples, but I see that we do not have time already.
Come back again and have another discussion. No, thank you for that, both of you. Before turning back to Beatrice, two really important topics there. If I was going to sum up in a couple of words, the geopolitics, it was there's a need to get granular. There's a need to educate yourselves and continue to educate yourselves as both boards and management. That there are risks to manage, but there are also big opportunities there as you go through that. But you have to kind of roll your sleeves up and work through it. And on AI, be strategic, upskill. Again, there seems to be lots of messages around upskilling, but think a lot about innovation outside of AI. AI isn't the only way to innovate, but if you are using technology and AI, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you need to think about, including data and IT infrastructure, which itself is governed by or influenced by geopolitics. So with that, Rytis, Maria, thank you very much. Great conversation as always. And I'm going to hand back to Beatrice to talk about systems thinking.
Yes, thank you to all of you. But basically, we have heard today about how boards deal with geopolitics and AI. And as it was said a couple of times, the risk is to address all this topic in silo, miss the broader picture, and fail to connect the dots. This is why at ecoDa we have set up a working group to discuss how board should embrace all these topics, these priorities at the same time, and deal with complexity. To do that, we are conducting interviews and we are still at the early stage in our brainstorming. And if by any chance someone in the audience would be to step in and to propose to have an interview with us on this topic, please let me know. But I can share with you already some initial thoughts that we get from the interviews that we have conducted so far. So first of all, and this will not surprise you, complexity itself is not new. So boards have always had to deal with complex organization. What has changed, and we understand it, however, is the speed and the intensity of all those topics. A good starting point, and this is something that we have learned from our interview, is to try to have a type of simplification. So boards first need a clear and shared understanding of the strategy and the value proposition. And without this, it's difficult to deal with complexity in a very meaningful way. However, it's clear that we cannot make everything simple. That's clear. We have to accept the complexity in itself. And we have heard it also from Maria and others that information is really key. And the problem is that the tendency is to provide board members with too much information. And in fact, too much information can definitely slow down decision makings. And this is why boards need the right level of information to support decisions, and management needs to present the information in a clear and useful way. And we feel that the board and the management need to agree on what is relevant for decision making. Dealing with complexity requires also cooperation, collective thinking, and cooperation is becoming increasingly important, not only within organization, but also between organizations and across ecosystem. So we are looking at board level for people who have this capacity to bring together expertise and to look for the right expert outside the boardroom as well. What we understood also is that trust and culture matter as well a lot when it comes to complexity. In some cases, we have seen board members, in fact, they feel that they always need to go through the management to obtain information internally. There is a strong need for a trusting relationship between the board and the management that would allow board members to get access to information more broadly and more directly within the company and outside the company. We heard also from the different interviews that we had that the role of the chair, and I think it was mentioned also by Maria, the role of the chair is therefore essential in structuring the debate and keeping it focused. I think it's important, as it was said, to really look for priorities. So this is, in a nutshell, our first key findings. We will go, of course, deeper in our analysis and spend time understanding what this means for board members in terms of education. So we still have a couple of series of interviews that we will be conducting during the summer. The idea would be to come with a kind of some conclusion of tentative conclusions, let's say in September, early fall. So surely we will come back to our community with our key findings, and we might also involve again EY, and maybe we can have an interview with you and Andrew and Martin to move ahead on this topic. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to react at this stage, or shall we close the webinar now? We can't hear you, Andrew.
No, it's a super interesting topic, and I'm sure we'd love to be involved. I was at a presentation at the Vatican last week talking about ethics and AI, and some of the most interesting presentations that were made were about the human elements that need to be preserved, including things like critical thinking, judgment, etc. So I think it's a super interesting topic that we need to focus on in the age of AI.
Yes, it's really a timely topic for us at ecoDa. So let's close the webinar now. It's 12 o'clock. So let me thank again our audience and all our speakers, Maria, Rytis, as well as Martin and Andrew, who did a very good moderation as usual. I wish you a very nice day to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye-bye,
Maria. Bye,
everybody.
Rytis. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you to you.